Welcome everyone. I hope you all are doing well and safe. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Hamza Tahir and I'm the CMX Connect host. I'm hosting this amazing session on community building for startups. CMX Connect events are about harnessing the incredible power of community. The program fulfills the need of community professionals to come together in person and learn, grow, and well, definitely connect. And now a warm welcome to our amazing speakers for today's session. We have Farah for the Regional Manager APAC Techstars, Marta, lead organizer startup group in Korea, and we have Sanya Ejaz, Senior Community Manager at NIC Islamabad. Thank you guys, thank you for joining us. And so without any further delay, let's proceed to today's session. I'll start with an individual question to all the panelists. So the first question is with Marta. For our local listeners, what is the startup ecosystem like in Korea, Marta?
Yeah, well, maybe backtrack a little bit, because obviously, as you can see, I'm not originally Korean, but I've been living here for the last 12 years. I'm you could say a community builder, an ecosystem builder of all sorts in the Korean startup ecosystem. So if you're following the news, especially here in Asia, you might have read a couple of articles, recent articles, praising Korea for being one of the rising stars of the startup scene. And that's true. The government here has been investing a lot of money and a lot of resources into building a really vibrant ecosystem based on technology, based on university resources, but also enabling wannabe entrepreneurs to easily tap into those resources. And funnily enough, from the things we've been hearing from the government for the next year, this is only a growing trend from now on. There has been recently announced a new deal that will be focusing on helping startups, helping the technology ecosystem focus more on achieving SDGs and being more impact oriented. And the money for this startups and small SMEs will only be increasing from now on. Mostly also to do with recovery from COVID, but also to focus more on having that technology really be focused on providing the needed solutions for the cities and the communities here in Korea and beyond. So it's a very exciting ecosystem, and it's also starting to slowly open its up towards the global startup scene. It's a slow process, but if you are interested in Korea, and if you're interested in tapping into all the goodies that the government and the accelerators and the VCs are offering here, then it's certainly a place to keep an eye on. You're muted.
Sorry. So for Farah, I would like to go with the same question, because we're trying to tell our community, like, what's the startup scene in different communities around the world. So for our local listeners again, what is the startup ecosystem like in Malaysia?
Yeah, sure. So just a heads up, I manage the region of Asia Pacific. So my knowledge may not be as in depth as it should be, or as you think it should be for my own country, but I'll give you, like a basic light touch overview. So at the end of the day, I do think that Malaysia's developed a fair bit in terms of the startup ecosystem. We did have a huge boom earlier, maybe in 2013 to 2015. This is kind of like the second wave of excitement that's happening in the country and in the city itself as well. I would say that it's still a little bit nascent compared to, if you want to compare us to Silicon Valley or any other big cities, or even Singapore. And to be honest, we're a bit behind from Korea, from my perspective. But we do have a lot of resources. The best one is me. I'm based here. But other than that, we've got great government initiatives. We've got great government entities. A lot of the corporations are also super supportive. For example, we've got the Cradle Fund that is supported by different government agencies and conglomerates that helps to kind of fund not only later stage startups, but most importantly, they target early stage startups, which is the issue here, right? If you compare us to Silicon Valley, where a lot of the older startups come back and they invest into the new startups, we don't see much of that here because a lot of our older startups came from the dot-com boom, and then they would invest in property and things that you'll get your money's worth from. So we're kind of building that up again. It's interesting to see how entrepreneurial the younger generation is. And what I think is cool in the recent times due to COVID is everybody's becoming more entrepreneurial. And it's a great time to kind of harvest all the resources we've built from the first round of the startup boom in this country and making that available for everybody else in the crowd. So I would just say your question's a little bit broad, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have on LinkedIn, or if you want to pop it in the chat.
Thank you. Definitely, I know a lot about the Malaysian ecosystem and the opportunities that the early stage startups and the growth stage startups have over there. For example, there's a lot of big corporations. Even if they don't have their offices in Malaysia, they have their offices right next to you in Singapore. And then I've seen a lot of startups working with Singapore co-founders, and these Singapore Malaysian duo startups are really a hit thing over there. And it's really glad to have such a support from such a neighbor country. With that, I would like to proceed to Senia with the question. Senia, you've been building communities over here in Pakistan for the last 6 years, doing community building and working with a lot of community organizations, working at National Incubation Center as a community manager. So, what is your what are your thoughts regarding the community building in Pakistan and the opportunities for startups in Pakistan?
Thank you, Hamza. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hello. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you guys are logged in from. It's a pleasure to be here on this panel with Farah and Marta as well. To just give you a little bit of perspective about community building in Pakistan, it's very, I would say, at an early stage. I've been a part of the ecosystem for the past 6 years, and community building is concept here. There are community managers, there are organizations building communities, but mostly towards building startup communities, not startups building their own communities. So I think that's something that we're still catching up on as well. But the good part is that as part of the ecosystem over the past 5 to 8 years, the ecosystem has grown immensely. So there are key players or key ecosystem players in the market before, but now there are a lot of different telecom providers, development sector, the government itself is taking a lot of interest, and due to that, we've opened up national incubation centers in about in Pakistan. And overall, I mean, the startup ecosystem is evolving as well, and maturing. So of course, we'll get into more detailed discussions at a later stage, but just your current question, I feel like over the years, it has matured.
Thank you, Sania. And definitely community building in Pakistan, we have a lot of opportunities. There are very active communities in terms of developer community. And community building, it's many active communities like Startup Grind, and playing their role to have people learn more skills, connect with other community members, and to explore opportunities not just across different cities but also across different countries. I would like to go to all of you, on a more general question, any one of you can answer on that, which is why is community building important for any startup, and how do they start? Because just to add a bit more into that question, because we know community building is like everywhere, even in a startup right from its start. you have to build a little or a very close community with your co-founders. Like, you need to onboard them on your vision, and then as you grow, community building is right there in the whole journey, right from the start of that idea till the end of till the growth stage of that product. Or when you're a big company like Facebook or Google, they keep track of their communities, they keep engaging with them, and having customers feedback, improving their functionality. So it's just in this whole journey, along with all the other things, community building is a really important thing. So I would love to have thoughts from you guys, like what do you think about that?
I would maybe it's going to be a bit of a controversial statement, especially for myself, since I do call myself a community builder of all sorts, but I don't think we build communities. We kind of give them space to grow. And our role really is about creating that space, creating those facilities for people to connect and become a community. A community, it's not forced fun. And if it is, it's not going to be named a community. And it might become something else, some other organization or some other entity, but it won't be necessarily a community. You kind of have to let communities be. And sometimes, and with either as a startup or as an ecosystem builder or community builder, you have to kind of acknowledge that it's a living organism and it won't necessarily go exactly where you want it to go. But going back to your question on why as startups need communities, depending where, like you said, like what sort of communities. Is it a community within your company? Is it a community of startuppers, of entrepreneurs? Is it a community of communities? It's really all about having that support system, a way of connecting, of easily reaching out to the right resources. Yeah, it's better together than alone. Like no man is an island. That's proven by famous writers and that one movie with Hugh Grant. So it's only up to us to kind of keep on nurturing a space, be it physical or virtual, where people can build those connections that later grow into communities, and that we can later as startups utilize as potential customers, as potential feedback, potential resources of talent, etc., etc.
I think that was great. Just like to add on to that and say, for the past 5 or 6 years that I've been building communities, I agree that it is always started by an individual. But since your question was why should startups build communities, I would say that communities, especially startup communities, should always be led by entrepreneurs, because you are the ones who know what you need. You are the ones who know the gaps in your community, in your ecosystem. You know other founders, other investors, and having a pool of you would be able to make sure that there's a whole network that gets plugged in, right? So from, for example, the like Boulder thesis, if you've heard of that, from Brad Feld, from one of his books. So he said that it has to be led by entrepreneurs, which I agree with. You must have a long-term commitment as much as you're committed to your, that's right, there's a new book. Hey, plug. But yeah, you're committed to your business, right? So you should be as committed to the community, because whatever resources you have today is there because of your predecessors. And you'd like to make sure that keeps rolling for the next round of startups, so that when you actually make it big and you want to reinvest, there is a pool already existing there. And the other 2 points include, making sure that it's inclusive as a community, you don't leave anybody out, and finally making sure that it is engaging. So that's just a little bit that I would like to add to that question.
Thank you, Farah. I think both of you covered it very well, but I just want to add a couple of things as well. To build a community, number one, I have in the past 6 years seen firsthand the power of community for what it does for startups. They become your early adopters. They become the people who drive your growth. In some sense, become your brand ambassadors or your startup ambassadors as well. There are also people who give you very highly engaging sort of like content and feedback when it comes to understanding your market, understanding what sort of changes you need to make to your MVP. And not just that, I feel like any community at the very outset share a certain set of values and build trust together, right? So for a startup, it's really important those people that will fall in love with your brand or your product, because they're the ones that are going to stay with you till the very end. And for any, for instance, for a startup, your community, your customers or your employees or your extended circle, or even a community of if you're in the art space or the tech space, it could be your developers or your connectors. The very outset, I feel like it's very important to have a community of people, know those people that can be there together, so that your startup grows with it.
Thank you, Tanya. So let's move to the next question. That's the same question. That's another question because right now we're going through this pandemic, and most of the things and most of the events, just like this one that we're doing, is online, and people are adopting new technologies to stay in contact, and some companies even using these technologies like Zoom, Bevy, Amazon, Chime, or something to stay in contact with their customers or face to face. Or that brings us to another question. With everyone adapting to the new normal, what does community building look like to you in the future, when we because for such a after this pandemic, and even the vaccine isn't yet rolled out to everyone, so there's still time for all of us to have this offline meetups. So till then that thing actually happens, what do you guys think for the future of events these days?
Well, you and I were having a bit of a conversation earlier today about that, about lacking that personal touch this year to everything. But for me, so I didn't say that at the beginning, but I run Seoul Startups, the biggest international startup community here in Korea, that we created 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, because there was no community in Korea. Like I said, Korea is very government driven, but not very down up driven. So this was kind of our answer to that. And we've always been mostly online, and even so much so this year. So it's not like this year has not hindered anything for us. In fact, it made us specialize in online events even more. And it also encouraged our Korean users, Korean members, to be more active. In Korea, online up to this year was considered unprofessional and not real. Like, in order to really make a connection, not only did you have to attend an offline event, but be actually introduced by a mutual connection. I guess it's a very Korean thing in a sense, maybe so that you have to have, making a personal connection is a bit of like a dance. And with online events, obviously you cannot do that. But that being said, 2020 happened, and we had to kind of reinvent ourselves. And I think I can see even on our Seoul Startup Slack channel, more and more Korean members being more active, proactive, in fact, approaching other members. And I think it just opens up new opportunities for us to, in fact, you don't have to go, say, to Pakistan to meet in person. We can just have this call and have a perfectly fine conversation about any topic that we want to, and have exactly the same value for a percentage of the price that we would normally have to fly ourselves there. So we gotta take what we can. But that being said, I do miss meeting people in person.
I think.
So,
Yeah. So.
Yeah, sure, Sanya.
So I think community building. In the next year, I see a lot of so just like Bevy, just like what we're doing right now, and just like Marta mentioned, there are going to be a lot of new ways for people to host online events, a lot of new tools, a lot of new, including I mean, Zoom obviously is great, but I've seen in the past 2-3 months, I've seen some virtual events happening, which were happening on online tools, and they were amazing. I mean, I mean, even though you would be sitting in your own room, but you would feel like you're at an actual virtual event with different conference rooms and different meeting rooms and all of that. So I do see that even with the pandemic, with the new normal happening, I do see that community building, or just the fact that we can meet each other to a wider international community and not just within just global borders. I feel like it's definitely going somewhere. End of the day, just like Marta said, it is very important for communities to have that sense of belonging, have that sense of culture, and be able to celebrate small moments, and all of that is sometimes missing. Again, I would have loved to meet all of you in a panel and just sit in a room together and be able to celebrate this discussion together. But again, it is possible for more people to connect now more than ever, as opposed to before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Do we have time? Can I chime in?
Yes, definitely. We do have a lot of time.
Just checking. Awesome. I like that question. I like that you're looking forward, and I don't know who is in our audience, so I'm going to keep it quite general. But based on all the work, I think most of us here, we're all community builders here that have done this year. I'm pretty sure there are a few things that we have in common. First of all, identifying the value that we want to give to our communities. I think that is the main hook. And moving forward, we will be able to kind of narrow that down a little bit better using data, right? I think nowadays, no matter what platform you're using, everyone's obsessed with data. And it's time that community builders themselves start learning how to use this data and leveraging that, because there's the future of community building, I think, also includes some monetary value. I know that it's traditionally always something that you do voluntarily, but I think moving forward, there's a huge value with that, since more and more bigger brands are also identifying that as well. And finally, there's this whole point on engagement, right? Like, you could have immense value, you could have a lot of data, you could have a very specific targeted audience, and you get that audience, but for you to capture their attention for long enough, that means you need to be very creative and innovative in how you're engaging them. Like you said, we don't know when we're going to be able to have a conference in Bali in the next 2 years, but what if you have really, really fun online games? I know in Techstars we've used Icebreaker.video. We supported them recently. One of our hackathons, actually one of the final startups, built a interactive conference / AI-based like web hosting thing over the 54 hours. I think it's pretty incredible. And they use that as their party platform at the end of the weekend. So, it's kind of forcing people to be more creative. I don't even know what the whole future of community might look like. I think it's up to you, the audience who's watching this right now, because you're excited about it. So I want to see what you build.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all those valid points, and sharing your experience, since you're managing this whole APAC region in Techstars, and being working as a facilitator, and even a participant, or organizing startup weekends like in Pakistan, or attending startup weekends across the world. This year, I actually it was a new experience for me as well to which I haven't done before, like, online startup weekend. For example, I attended the online startup weekend happened in Singapore. So, at first for me, it was just a normal event, and I didn't know how it'll be done, how it'll turn out. And then, I ended up making so many friends across the world, because, if we were doing it that locally, I don't think so, we would be able to make so many, more personal connections across the world. And but that happened in Singapore team. They really did a great job, because it was also for them the first time they were doing this, and doing event on such a huge level, with keeping all the participants engaging. That's another very interesting thing, because we've noticed after doing a lot of events recently online, because everyone is doing so there's another thing, everyone is doing these days events online. So a lot of times community or if they're developer events or startup events, a lot of time people just get bored of attending these events. For example, if I'll share an example with you today, we had so many registrations, but right now it's just 16 people who are attending the event right now. It might be people are. It's not that because people don't want to attend events. It's just because once you have such events in a bulk, back-to-back online events, people get bored, even if it's something that they really want to attend. But at the same time, I've actually loved how big communities have adapted this thing to make community members more and more engaged. For example, sharing digital swag, sending some swag right from the headquarters. For example, that was the best thing that I received. I actually received last week a pair of socks from Slack. I was attending a virtual conference, Slack annual conference, and the main motivation behind that whole conference was not these swags or something, but at the same time, when you end up receiving something that is being parceled to you from another part of the world, that something makes you more interesting to attend these kind of events. And then maybe these days we're not getting that free pizza or free drinks that we have on physical events, which is a main motivation for a lot of people who attend the local events. But at the same time, these events and these communities have found a lot of other ways to keep their communities and members active during this COVID world. And I'm also really looking forward how this whole thing will go once we do have the vaccine, and then going back to the in-person contact again. So I would like to question you all on another thing. What are some of the challenges faced in your respective countries when it comes to community building? Because and especially during the online events as well, because you can actually share your previous difficulties while having the physical events and building the communities, and also during the online world. What are your experiences?
Before I answer your question, let me go back a little bit. You said that there's not a lot of people showed up to this event, although a lot of registered. I wouldn't be too worried about that, because what I've noticed with our events as well, people don't show up, but they watch them later on. So if you upload it on YouTube or on Facebook, they will see it. They just, for some reason, couldn't show up or didn't feel like it, and that's fine. But I think it's very important to record events, to write posts about them, create content around them, because it will reach people. In fact, it might even reach more people than it would have been with an offline event. And just don't get discouraged if only a few people show up. That's fine. But just keep on recording, keep on editing, keep on uploading, and the message will reach them out. For your question, Hamza, so like I briefly mentioned in Korea, the problem is that the Korean startup ecosystem does not really see community as part of the ecosystem, which is a very big problem. They will tell you it's not a problem, but it is a very big problem. So everything is driven not entrepreneur centric. Everything here is government centric. It's the government that decides which industries will be invested in. It's the government that decides what's the flavor of the month. It's the government that decides that, oh, it's now time for the startups to go global. Nobody really asks the startups what they think about all that. And the startups kind of follow along with that, mostly because they are getting free lunch money from the government. So they're like, well, yeah, I think differently, but I'll go along with that because I'm getting, a whole bunch of money for writing a few reports. So why not? But that also means that for a long time, startup communities were non-existent. What did exist and still exists are very exclusive groups, which like Farah just mentioned is exactly the opposite of what a community should be: inclusive, open to anyone. No, it's like communities that you have to be in, secret communities, secret chat rooms that you have to be invited into. And we don't want that. I mean, they serve their purpose. They're like a, boys club. Funnily enough, obviously mostly boys, but that's not what we want as a community. So that's why with Soul Startups, we kind of want to set an example. We don't want to be the only community in Korea. Far from it. We want more communities to go on, but I kind of see us as a first stepper that people will be following later down the line. So we kind of have to set a precedent with all this. And it's not only communities, but also within organizations here, like a community manager in an accelerator or a co-working space is really a floor management role. It's a person that is the lowest on the food chain and is usually a fresh graduate from school. When I tell people that I call myself a community builder, I got laughed a couple of times. And they were like, maybe you should think about getting a real job. And I'm like, well, but there's a very big need for what I'm doing right now, right? But at the moment, it's slowly changing, but still what I do is pretty much seen as voluntary work and is taken for granted. And it takes a lot of perseverance not to be discouraged by that. So fingers crossed, it will change eventually.
Yeah, thank
you. Fingers crossed indeed, Martha. So just to give Martha just gave sort of like an overview of the challenges there. In Pakistan, I feel like there are communities here. There are communities for women entrepreneurs, for startup founders, and a lot of other spaces as well, book clubs, and a lot of other things happening. But I feel one of the challenges that we face is that as humans, we have a very short attention span. So it's very difficult to get everyone engaged for a longer time period. So for instance, if we do have gatherings, if we have events, everyone, all the attendees would expect more entertainment and less community work or collaboration, a lot of other things. So I think the mindset here is more towards joining a community for fun rather than for learning and for collaboration and for a lot of other things as well. The other challenge I think we face here is retention. So just because of our short attention span, or because there's so many options there, and because our ecosystem is growing, there are a lot of players now, a lot of different running, and they're not very connected with each other. So they're all running sort of like in isolation, which is why people generally tend to lose a certain following of following one community and just follow the next one, or just try to be a part of multiple communities and not really be a part of any of them, in all honesty. So I think that's one of the challenges here that we face. There are a lot of I say that the communities that are run here in Pakistan right now, Startup Grind is one of them. Then we have Startup Weekend here as well. We have different accelerators, incubators running them as well. But mostly it's the community managers, and the way that Martha explained it is actually beautiful. I could so resonate with it. It's true. It's the job of that one person to get everyone connected and always stay together. And that's a very difficult job. So I feel other challenges that we face is there are not many community builders as opposed to a wider community that's growing here in Pakistan.
Yeah, that sounds great. I don't have much to add at all, actually. I think Martha gave a wonderful view from Korean perspective, but also from an individual's perspective as a community builder or community leader. Like managing communities myself, I think people tend to forget that I work for a company and I build communities for a company. So I'm actually getting paycheck to do that, which means I don't work on the weekends, or sometimes I too get public holidays. But because you're a community builder, it seems to be sort of like an accepted notion that people think your time is always free, and people are always like, hey, I want to talk to you because you know everybody and you're a community builder. I can ask you 1,000,001 things and I don't have to pay for it at all ever. But that's not true because we got bills to pay, right? So that's one thing that I resonate a lot with, Martha. Thank you for saying that out loud. And Sinia, you mentioned about things being quite insular, and you said that that's what it is like in Pakistan. I would say it's not just in Pakistan, it's in many countries. It's actually a huge problem in Australia that we're trying to bridge. People tend to get very competitive with one another, but I always think, the best way moving forward is to be collectively supportive of each other, and that's like the essence of building communities anyway. You can have many community builders, but there will always be a few that will know everyone. And I think it's just nice to be able to work together. You would know the few, you don't have to say their names, and you'd be like, yeah, I know the people who know everybody else. So that's something I agree with completely. You also touched on engagement, and I think to dive a little bit deeper on that, that's my last point, would be to kind of look into what you're trying to do when you're engaging them. I'm just going to assume everything's going to be done online, right? So for example, today you said, yeah, we had a lot of registrations, few turnouts. Martha said it's fine. I agree, it's fine. But it's also dependent on what you're trying to do with it and who you're trying to target. If you are trying to build engagement and you're trying to get something to come back in terms of feedback, then you have to be very mindful in what you're trying to put into your agenda. So you have to set expectations early on and say, hey, this is going to be a session with a lot of activity. And then people will realize, right, then if I want to participate, I should be there and I should be present, as opposed to people understanding, okay, it's going to be a recorded session, it's content, I can always click it and watch it later. And the metrics you as a community builder want to get from that would be very different as well, because on one hand, you'd get direct feedback for you to use for something else. And on the other hand, it's like data in terms of eyeballs and just understanding what people want. So I think it ties back into everything else that we've said so far, being, data driven and looking into the future with what people want. Also, just because I just said that, I remembered, Hamza, you mentioned Zach gave you a pair of socks. I think that's wonderful. I would love to be able to give everybody in my community a pair of socks, but I don't have the money to do that because COVID affected all our businesses. So what can you do, right? You want to give something special and you're remote and you don't have that much money, people are not sponsoring you. Consider having a little bit of budget, raise some sponsorship for that, and maybe hire local creative talents. Maybe you've got people who are digital artists that you can, help finance a little bit and create customized Zoom backgrounds, or create customized, thank you postcards, which is what we try to do as well. So just based off that, maybe it's something you can talk with your community members and other people and discuss how you can collaborate without having to spend too much money.
Yeah, I totally agree on your last point. I'm lucky that I got a pair of socks, but yeah, at the same time, having a digital swag, even either it's for a developer community that that you're working with, or you're attending events, or either it's like a general event that you're attending. It's really good to have some kind of appreciation or some digital swag in terms of like either the Zoom background, or a certificate, or a Thanksgiving card or something. So and there's another thing, there was another problem that we personally faced that I want to share, while building a developer community, because I'm running Facebook developer circles for a very long time, and we've been doing a lot with the Facebook developer team, in Pakistan and in the rest of the world as well, like, starting some new initiatives for women and for also for people who are not that good with the technology as well. So there's one thing that that we've learned while running a big community, like a big community group of like 5,000 people, 6,000 people who are really active, at your events, either their physical events or either their online events, is that we've highlighted some of the success stories in terms of, like, you were mentioning that what are the metrics or what are your goals while doing an event or while running a community that you want to get. So in terms of that, whenever you do something, yes, if you're doing something for the community, for example, I'm mentioning more about the developers because I'm more into those developer things and developer communities. So for developers, it's always to see the impact or the product that they build and see, like, how much it's appreciated by that technology that you're using. For example, if I'm building something using the Facebook technology, I'm doing it for Facebook hackathon, then I also want that if I've built something amazing, I should get more appreciation from Facebook that I use this technology and by the Facebook and build something that is really helping the community as well. So and then highlighting these, just like Techstars these days, I was reached out from one of the representatives from the Techstars a month ago, and he was asking about some of the success stories from Startup Week in Islamabad, so that they can highlight these success stories at the Startup Weekend website, and in order to grab more people interest to attend these startup weekends that are going to happen online. So that was another thing, like highlighting success stories and what are the outcomes, and sharing those outcomes with your community as well, keeping them on board with the whole vision of the community, not just in terms of doing the events, but also in terms of growing with your community. So I think that's pretty much about the whole session. We can see if we have some questions in the chat, and do we have some time to respond to those questions. I see one question from Justin. I guess Marta has already answered that question in the chat, but maybe both of you, Sanya and Farah, can also reply to that one. What are all of your favorite digital services to help develop and host these communities? I'm a big fan of Discord, for example. So yeah, Farah, like Techstars is definitely sharing a lot of resources, for all to run all these communities and do events. So would love to hear something from you and Sanya.
Right, awesome. Thank you for the question, Justin. Love that you're being very active here. Digital services to develop and host these communities. So in terms of hosting, I'm similar to Marta. I think we're always stuck on Slack. Again, Discord is what we also recommend for us, for our community leaders to use when we want to be a bit more inclusive. It kind of really depends. I assume you're asking for the Pakistani community because, for example, for certain countries that we manage, it can't even be anywhere off Facebook because Facebook Live is the only platform that works with the infrastructure they have in their country. On the other hand, though, I'm going to go on the way like thinking forward flip side part of this. So we recently are very, very interested and are trying out soon. So if any of you are Techstars community leaders, please come down for our APAC holiday party. We're going to use Miro, and we're trying to really use all these innovation platforms to engage people, because that way we can have more activity and collaboration as if you were having a live summit itself, where you can have like post-it notes, So Miro is really great. If you're not used to that yet, think of Miro as like a little bit of an advanced Canva. If you're not used to Miro, you can also consider this tool called Mural, M-U-R-A-L. That's a little bit more light touch, but Miro has better UX. So Mural is great. Other tools that you can consider, wow, there's just so many. I mentioned one earlier as well called icebreaker.video. So we use that for any icebreaking or what we call Second Thursdays. Second Thursdays is an initiative we run internally to include everybody in our ecosystem, not just community. So I build startup programs. People that I talk to are within this community, but we also have other founders. We've got mentors. We've got ecosystem developers, we've got salespeople and biz dev from corporations who are interested to learn more about founders, but we no longer have networking events. We host them on icebreaker.video. We create very curated and thoughtful questions where they can come in and they meet, one person. Is kind of like a quick speed dating coffee chat session with like cool music. So it depends on what you're trying to build and what environment you want to create for them, within what community. But if you want something more specific, I'm happy to answer any questions on LinkedIn as well. Those are just a few of my favorites: Mural, and icebreaker.video. Thank you, Marta.
So do you have anything to add on this, Sania?
Yeah, so I was just going to say Farah pretty much covered most of them, but yeah, it really matters which sort of event or what's the purpose for that session. If it's a panel discussion, if it's a virtual event, Hopin is really good. I just a very good event virtually for on Hopin as well. The whole interface and the user experience was really good as well. So yeah, so you pretty much covered all of them, but Hopin was one more that I like.
I would just quickly add that also depends what your community is used to using. So in Korea, people don't really like Slack per se, Korean users, like especially those who are not really used to using English on a daily basis. They prefer to use Kakao, which is kind of like a WhatsApp Messenger app for community building. And it's something that you have to also acknowledge. So when we do hackathons or startup weekends, we always use that as well as other tools to kind of back up and help people make this event more open and more engaging and more, friendly.
Yeah,
totally.
Yep. So let's see if we have any other questions. Otherwise, we're almost out of time.
We got one question.
Share some thoughts on joining multiple communities.
Go for it. That's my answer. Do it. You don't know what you like until you're part of that. Test it out. Try it out. If you don't like it, build your own one.
Plus, most of these communities are connected with one another in most cases. So, it's like you join one, you join all.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Because I actually got a point from Sania when she was mentioning a lot of that. There's a lot of communities in Pakistan. We have Google developer, just like any other Google developer group, Facebook developer circles, a lot of developer communities. So when you have so there's a sort of competition among them as well. In not just in terms of the community leaders who are running these communities, but at the same time the community members who actually join these communities. They associate themselves with one community. Sometimes, yes, I agree, Marta, that you need to understand that which are the values that you want to get, what are the kind of help that you want to get from a specific community. But they're all doing the same thing, but in a different way as well, with a different strategy, with a different team or something. So I think in joining a lot of communities, it's better to stick to needs and to a specific community that really serves the purpose. For example, if you're a developer and you need a support from, for example, Google, then a Google developer community, that will be great. You can get value from them. And then because a developer is not just working on one stack, he's working on a lot of different technologies. So yeah, it's good to to stay connected with all these different communities. It depends on the help, and it depends on the problem that you want to solve. So, yep. I don't think so. We have any other questions.
I think
Agreed. Thank you so much.
I think I agree with everything that you said. I think similarly to building a startup, when you start building communities, it's the same thing. You start with your why. Like, why are you doing it?
So we're run out of time as well, because I know Farah, you have another meeting after this, and thank you so much. Like, I actually reached out to both of you, Marta and Farah, on the runtime, and thank you so much. Like, you guys said that you're going to be available for this session. So before we actually just proceed to the end of the session, I would like to give a huge thanks to all of the amazing speakers and some of our key partners like Techstars, NIC Islamabad, CMX Connect as well, and also Soul Startups, and to our outreach partners as well, who brought you guys this event. And thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, Farah. Thank you, Sanya,
so much
for
Shukriya, everybody, for tuning in.
Hopefully see you again soon.
Yeah, that was a good. So guys, take care of yourself and stay safe. See you all.
In Bali at some point. Bye.
Hopefully next year, fingers crossed.
Yeah.